The first ring cuts through the stillness, sharp against the muffled weight of paper. Stacks of glossy magazines lean against the walls, binders gape half open across the desk, and the air is thick with the dust of ink and exertion. The bell trills again. The black rotary phone shivers, its coiled cord hanging tangled between handset and base. Stig Agastad leans forward and lifts the receiver. A voice crosses the line, halting, urgent. "Do you know of anyone who has been injured by a UFO?" Because that happened to me. Stig listened intently, and the words he heard would etch themselves forever into his soul. This was November 1981, and Karl Erik Pettersson was reaching out to UFO Sweden News. Karl and Stig's conversation would later unfold on the printed page beneath the headline, "Now it has happened. Man from Örebro seriously injured in close encounter." Four years earlier, the summer night twilight had swept across the plains of southern Sweden in a blue haze. Between the houses in Örebro, the heat of an unusually hot day still lingered. Here and there, windows and balcony doors were left ajar. In the villa of Karl Erik Pettersson, the balcony door stood open. Karl Erik and his wife were sleeping deeply. But the peace of the night was not to last for long. "I suddenly woke up with the immediate feeling that we were no longer alone in the bedroom," Karl Erik recalls. "When I lifted my head from the pillow, I was struck with sheer amazement at the sight of a strange being standing at the foot of the bed. The figure was about 1 meter tall and half transparent. No clear facial features were visible, which made its appearance most resemble a rag doll. Its hands looked like small clubs, yet they were strong enough to pull the blanket off me. Suddenly, it stretched out both hands and grabbed my ankles. In the same moment, it felt as if my whole body was coursed through by a powerful high-voltage current, a dreadful sensation, and without doubt, painful. I screamed loudly and threw myself up from the bed, at which the being immediately released its grip and seemed to drift away across the bedroom floor, out through the balcony door and over the railing. At Karl Erik's painful cry, his wife woke up in the bed beside him. In her startled state, she never managed to see the being before it slid out through the balcony door. But when the shocked couple had calmed themselves a little, they noticed something else instead. On Karl Erik's feet, 2 distinct white circular marks had appeared, exactly where the rag doll had touched him. The white patches remained for 2 days before they disappeared, something Karl Erik's wife was able to confirm. For 2 weeks, Karl Erik lived in uncertainty about what had really happened to his feet. But as the discomfort gradually grew stronger, Karl Erik was forced to seek medical attention. He finally decided to consult a company doctor. "I did not dare tell the doctor about my experience, otherwise they would have sent me straight to the psychiatric ward," Karl Erik states firmly. And thus began a long and depressing round of consultations with other doctors and medical institutions. Karl Erik was referred to the regional hospital in Örebro. There, a most peculiar X-ray examination was carried out. In order to obtain any image at all, the doctors had to take 29 X-rays of his left foot and 5 of the right. The physician who performed the X-rays was deeply puzzled and asked in astonishment what Karl Erik had been exposed to. At the neurology ward of the hospital, further tests were conducted, including urine samples, ECG, blood tests, and more. It was established that the nervous system in Karl Erik's feet was dead, yet all other values were normal. Examinations showed no signs of vascular disease. Neither circulatory disorders nor vascular cramps could explain the condition. 4 years after the incident, he once again visited the regional hospital. New X-ray examinations were carried out. This time, something even stranger appeared. Inside his left foot was now an unknown glowing sphere. The object was lodged deep inside the foot, near the joint of the heel bone. The sphere seemed to be about 4 to 5 millimeters in size. This took place before abduction accounts in the United States involving implanted objects became widespread. And it may well have been the first case of this kind in Sweden. According to Karl Erik Pettersson, the sphere remained in his body for the rest of his life. The doctors wanted to remove it surgically. They said it would not harm him, but the hospital could not explain how it had come to be there. Karl Erik passed away at the end of 1990 without ever learning what the sphere in his foot really was. An article published by UFO Sweden in 1997 included interviews with Karl Erik's two sons, Ulf and Bo. Mattias Andersson of the Archives for UFO Research spoke with Ulf, who had been 15 years old at the time of the incident. He recalled that his father waited some time before daring to speak about the being. Ulf had noticed that something had happened to him just before his father Karl Erik consulted a doctor. On the question of his father's credibility, Ulf said, "I am personally quite skeptical about this whole UFO business, but my dad was not the kind of man who would lie about things like that. The first thought when hearing the story was, what on earth has he come up with now? Then you thought it over and realized, hell, he would never stand up and lie to his own family about something like this. That mystery will never be solved. I have scratched my head many times thinking about it, and according to my reasoning, it really should be impossible. But at the same time, I believe my father." Bo Pettersson shares the same trust in his father. "At first, I brushed it all off. He said it was ragdolls or something of that sort. He wanted to blame it on something else. But when you pressed him with the question, what was it really? Then he grew more serious. This is not the kind of story a man goes around boasting or bragging about. My father came from a deeply Christian family. I do not know what he truly believed at the time of the incident, but he cried almost every time he spoke about it. I know that I trust my father completely. I truly do." Bo confirms that he was able to see the marks said to have been left by the being's hands on Karl Erik's feet. Yes, especially when his feet were cold. The front part of them became a bit lighter in color. He sometimes said himself that it looked like thick fingers or something of that kind, but you could not really make it out clearly. From the toes and a bit inward, you could say. They were a little lighter, but not abnormally so. Both feet looked the same, but whether that had anything to do with it or not, I cannot say. It all happened a long time ago, and Bo, who was 17 at the time, naturally has difficulty remembering certain details. For example, whether he noticed any difference in his father's feet before and after the event. No, not directly, but he did have somewhat bad feet. He was in pain because he was heavy, so his feet took the strain. After this tragic incident, Karl Erik said he could no longer manage the auto parts business. There was too much running around, fetching things back and forth. He sold the company, but still complained of feeling generally exhausted, burdened with 2 houses to look after, and wishing to devote himself to his family. Early retirement and insurance then had to be arranged. What he told us was that his feet were in such bad condition that he could no longer walk on them. He blamed it relentlessly on this phenomenon, the humanoid. But when friends and acquaintances came by, he never spoke about it, except perhaps to 1 or 2. We had a neighbor who was involved with UFOs, so to him he confided the story. Otherwise, he never said a word. When it finally came out in the newspaper, that was when people started showing up. I cannot say that I do not believe it, but I also cannot say that I am 100% certain it happened. I know what kind of man my father was, and when he spoke about this, he became very serious. When investigator Mattias Andersson of the Archives for UFO Research asked Bo what he himself believed about the story, he replied, "I will not believe it until I see it with my own eyes." According to Bo, a final X-ray of the entire body was carried out when Karl Erik fell ill with cancer around 1990. One of the doctors wanted to discuss the findings with the family, but Karl Erik dismissed the idea, saying, "Forget it, I already know what it is," implying that it had to do with the strange condition of his feet. despite medication, his feet never truly recovered. There was no permanent paralysis as such, but much of the sensation in his feet was lost. With the permission of the family, investigator Matthias Andersson wrote to the neurology clinic requesting a statement. Chief physician Margareta Samuelsson responded by rejecting the claim that the nervous system in the feet had died. In a letter dated October 31, 1994, she wrote, "I have now reviewed the medical records of Karl Erik Pettersson, born 23 February 1909. The change in the left foot that was visible on the X-ray, as well as the effect on the nervous system that we found in our examinations, had a medical explanation and did not appear puzzling to us in any way. Nor can I find much similarity between our assessment of the condition and the description Karl Erik Pettersson gives of his condition in the article copy you sent me. For reasons of medical confidentiality, I do not consider myself able to go into further detail." She further states that it is a good thing the case is written about, provided it is done in a factual way. Her professional evaluation was that the condition could be explained medically. She did not recognize the symptoms as Karl Erik described them, but to go into detail would be against hospital confidentiality rules. Matthias Andersson notes that one would like nothing more than to turn the question mark surrounding Karl Erik's strange encounter into exclamation points. If he had in fact invented the whole story, why would he lie to his own family and friends? Perhaps there is a medical explanation for the pain in his feet, but if so, what was it? Was Pettersson awake during the encounter? One idea is that he may have experienced a natural pain in his feet, and that it coincided with a disturbing nightmare in which the being appeared and in the dream became the source of his pain. This would align with Chief Physician Margareta Samuelsson's conclusion that nothing unnatural had happened to his feet. Matthias closes with a reminder. The information about the state of his feet and the meeting with the entity can only be confirmed by Karl Erik himself. Perhaps he sought to dull his suffering by attributing it to a being from space. This is not only a riddle for those of us who read or investigate it, it also deeply concerns his two sons. Bo has since often wondered what really happened that warm summer night. But only Karl Erik knew for certain, and to the very end he held to his story. The original article from 1982 also shows how the first investigator, Stig Agestad, considered Karl Erik's situation, his lonely position, and his fear of being ridiculed when he sought help for his illness. Stig writes, "On several occasions the doctors have asked him, 'What have you really experienced?' And each time his courage has failed him. He simply has not dared to give them the information that might have led to the right diagnosis and treatment. At UFO Sweden News we understand him, but at the same time, we feel that the whole situation is tragic. Karl Erik Pettersson is a victim of modern humanity's inability to accept anything that falls outside the normal boundaries. The doctors would probably not have believed him anyway. The encounter with the unknown being has completely altered Karl Erik Pettersson's life. And as mentioned, Karl Erik kept silent about this for nearly 4 years, until he could no longer bear it. Increasing difficulty in walking now threatens him with permanent disability. All of this because of a brief close encounter with a half-transparent entity that most resembled a rag doll. I will never forget Karl Erik Pettersson's opening words on the telephone. 'Do you know of anyone who has been injured by a UFO? Because that happened to me.'" What really happened to 55-year-old Karl Erik Pettersson on that summer night in 1978? A night that set him on a path toward disability and decline. Who, or what, was the figure that appeared at the foot of his bed, and why did it leave him in pain? Long after Karl Erik's death, the question lingers, unresolved. Among the many reports collected in Sweden, this remains one of the most unusual and tragic cases on record. And the deeper reason for this is anchored in the fact that he was no thrill seeker, that he kept the secret in close quarters and close to his chest. Because at the end of the day, the small details that underlined the mundane qualities of his life are what stands out. He was an ordinary small business owner, a husband and father, a man whose days were rooted in routine and family, and whose outlook was shaped by a devout Christian faith. In his experience, the human element and the unexplained converge in ways that cannot be dismissed. It is not only a story of what was seen, but of what was endured. And within his medical enigma, we are left with fragments, traces that hint at possible evidence. But we do not know, and we can only reflect on Karl Erik's fervent belief in his own senses. Was his account of the doctor's helplessness an addition made after the fact? He described himself as having lived through a search for causes and through findings that to some extent confounded medical science, only for the verdict in the end to fall back on medical certainty. What truth, if any, emerges in this gap of perception? We do not claim certainty here on Stories Lost. We share, we listen, and we invite you to take part in the conversation in the comments. Thank you for watching. A special thanks to Johan Harrison for tipping us off about this case. Thanks also to Hanat for the creative input. We'd also like to thank you for the coffee, and last but not least, our wonderful members and patrons. See you next week.